Welcome to everyone tuning in to join us for the November edition of the Samuel Lawrence Foundation's First Friday webinar series. My name is Bart Ziegler. I'm the president of the Samuel Lawrence Foundation. For today's very special edition of First Fridays, we have assembled a global panel of inspiring leaders who are working to preserve Indigenous cultures. I'll turn this over to our moderator, Lance Gould, CEO of Brooklyn Story Lab, to introduce our incredible speakers. But before I do that, I'll remind everyone to vote next Tuesday for the democracy that we have, November 5th, 2024. Lance, thank you very much for today.
Thank you, Bart, and welcome to all. If a language disappears, what is lost along with it? Say, for example, that language is in the Amazon, and that language offers the only word to identify a particular plant species, which can only be found within a few square miles of the rainforest. Once a language disappears, along with the knowledge of the elders who speak it, whole swaths of wisdom disappear too. And that is precisely what is happening in the Amazon right now, as well as in many indigenous communities around the world. Sometimes that is part of the disastrous legacy of colonialism, which banned certain languages and practices and helped usher them into oblivion. And other times it is because so much of Western culture is digitized, where so much indigenous culture is not. Of course, there's also an ever more volatile climate, which threatens to ravage physical artifacts, cultural heritage, and the land in which certain communities call home. Remember, too, that it is universally acknowledged that indigenous people have a special relationship with the land. They are considered the finest stewards of the environment. So we must act to preserve indigenous knowledge. First, morally and anthropologically, to honor the cultures and societies under threat of cultural extinction. And second, because preserving that knowledge has potential benefits for the common good of us all. We'll get into the details of that shortly, but for now, let me introduce you to our amazing panel of guests. And I will note that we have guests coming in from all over the world, and there may be some technical difficulties. We have people coming in from Colombia today, from South Africa, and coming back from the UN where they're doing UN business. So everyone will be on at some point, but we are having some technical challenges that we're overcoming. But joining us today as panelists, we have Indrani Pal Chowdhury, founder and chief vision, Open Origin and Shakti Regeneration Institute, and the founding board member of the Oki Language Project. She's joining us from Colombia today, where COP16 just took place. Dr. Philbert Aaron, permanent representative of the Commonwealth of Dominica to the UN, and he is on his way back to his office from the UN right now, so he'll be joining us very shortly. Atosa Sultani, Director of Global Strategy, Amazon Sacred Headwaters. She's joining us from Cape Town, South Africa, and she's currently en route back to her hotel right now, and you can see her there. And then we have Joseph McNeil Jr., Chief Executive Officer at Sage Development Authority of the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe, the sovereign nation that is between North and South Dakota. Thank you all for joining us. For our first round of discussions, we'll speak with our panelists about their communities and their specific work. And then in a second round of questions, we'll get their perspectives on broader questions about preserving Indigenous wisdom. So let's get to it. Today is the first day of American Indian Heritage Month, and as with many social awareness days and months, it allows us a moment to reflect on the contributions of Native American and Indigenous cultures here in North America. Our first guest, Joseph McNeil Jr., has an incredible lineage. He's a descendant of Sitting Bull on his mother's side, and his father was one of the Greensboro Four, a quartet of young African American men who staged a sit-in at a segregated Woolworth's lunch counter during the Jim Crow 60s. So, Joseph, tell us a little bit more about your upbringing and how you took lessons from both of your parents and their respective cultures.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me here. And I want to say Haume Takuyape. Hello, my relatives around the world. It is an honor for me to be with you today to talk about where we've come from, where we are, and hopefully where we're going together in this space as we've been broken apart previously. I'm very fortunate to have been born to my mother and my father, period. And I think for a lot of us, we don't recognize that just in its own being, no matter where our lineage is from, because we've all, if we're Indigenous or of color around the world, have suffered to a degree that we must fight for our existence, fight for our rights, fight for our children's right to have good water, good food, land, to have equal rights, etc. In this space. So I've been very fortunate to have the parents that I have. Currently, they're still with us in this space. My mother is Hunkpapa Lakota. Our great grandfather is Wunbul, Tatanka Wajila, which is my name. And he was the nephew and adopted son of our great grandfather, Lala Sitting Bull, Tatanka Iotake. And as you know, Tatanka Iotake, he stood to stand to protect our people. He didn't stand to expand lands or expand control. He only looked to protect those who couldn't protect themselves, so that we could have our culture. And every successive generation after him existed to survive so that we could continue to speak the language that we still speak today. And we're very fortunate to have that through immersion schools, etc., in this space. My mother met my father in Rapid City, South Dakota during a civil rights action to show housing discrimination in apartment buildings back in 1967, 1966. Met there and then moved forward to have myself a few years later. My father was one of the original Greensboro Four members that sat at the Woolworth counter when he was 17 years old in Greensboro, North Carolina, to sit down to stand up for our rights across the country. And that served as a catalytic moment that sparked the civil rights movement through media, as it were. So every time media advances, there's an opportunity there. And that, timing was on our side in that space, on everyone's side in that space, as the civil rights movement took off. And we're able to do that through nonviolent means. So growing up in this space, knowing this on both sides, my mother is very spiritual and connected to the earth and connected to season, and my father on the other side very connected to law and civil rights and how to strategize. And so as we move through my life coming into this space, it has always been something for us to serve our people. My older brother, was former chairman of the Standing Rock Sioux tribe here. His name is Ron. His horse is Thunder. And I have other tribal chairmen like Charlie Murphy, Dave Archambault, Mike Faith, and then the great late Jesse Taken Alive, who served as examples and leaders before us to be of service for our people and to stand for our rights, our treaty rights and obligations, but more so our rights as Lakota, that we can stand here and practice our religion, practice our faith, practice our language, be who we are, and re-immerse ourselves in that so that we can live in seasonality and we can practice the spirituality that exists between us and all of our relatives. And it is for us, we say mitakuye oyase, which is to all of my relatives. And that in itself, saying that is a singular prayer because we exist with the grass. We exist with all the creatures that live therein, those that fly, crawl, walk, think, grow, swim. Those are all the relatives that we must have respect of in our lives. So it's fortunate for me to come into a place working for Sage Development Authority here that is driving to build regenerative energy, renewable energy for
Yeah, I was
revenue.
going to ask you about Sage, which I was going to say. First of all, you have such a unique experience, Joseph. Like you have such a unique perspective based on the lineage of your parents, and so thankful for sharing that wisdom with us. And speaking of Sage, you're the CEO of the Sage Development Authority, which is, I believe, the first native nation owned wind farm project in the U.S. and the first to not sell rights to a developer. Tell us more about this wind farm project and why it's such a game changer in terms of both renewable energy and native sovereignty, and what that might mean for Sioux culture as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Our plan is a 235 megawatt wind farm, and this has been in the planning phases. We thought about this back to 2009 to 13, and then another council thought about it 10 years before that because we knew we had great wind. So for us, 235 megawatts, we are in pre-development of this project, into the real development of phases of it, of course, and we haven't sold it to a developer. And the reason we've been able to do that, is because of the IRA legislation by the Biden administration. They allow for tribes to have construction loan of up to 70% of the construction financing of it through a low interest loan through the Department of Energy Loans Program Office, which gives us more control over our project. So we're one of the only projects in the wind space to do such a project at 56 turbines, 4.5 megawatts each, and have retained ownership of the project through these phases. So we intend to have ownership all the way through the time of spinning and rotors generating electricity, which is going to bring vast amounts of revenue that we foresee previously. We were thinking initially that we might be able to drive $40 million out of this project over 20 years. Now we're looking at possibly $500 million out of this project over the
Wow.
next 20 years. So what is that going to bring back for us? Our ability to serve our infrastructure needs and to live actually by our own decisions and our own revenue and our own sourcing to take care of ourselves and our people, so that we can move forward in a way that's not restricted to us, as the federal government had put us into a box and told us we had to eat rations and we had to live this washichu, this white kind of way, and then took our culture from us and outlawed everything that we are and we were, so that we're rebuilding the space. One of our primary projects is a museum cultural interpretive center, so that we can house our language in a digitized way, bring all of our artifacts back so we can teach and hold our culture in a space and tell our story by our own voices, not through a Western lens or authority. So we're very excited by this, and we're doing more on the ground for distributed energy projects for our communities, so that we come to a place where none of our members are going to have to pay for electricity, or very reduced cost for that in the near future.
That's amazing, and $500 million. What a I was going to say what a windfall, but I didn't mean to make a pun. But there you go.
It's going to take a
Um, Indrani, let me come to you. Uh, you have a fascinating background as well. You are an award-winning filmmaker whose honors include a Tribeca Film Festival Disruptive Innovation Award, a CNN Expose Award bestowed by Quincy Jones, and Cannes Gold Lions, among others. And you are a longtime collaborator with David Bowie, and you've worked extensively with Beyonce, Lady Gaga, and so many luminaries. Tell us about your journey from Calcutta to this unique perch in the artistic world. We may have lost Indrani. Indrani is joining us from Colombia, so her internet is not great. So while we're waiting for her to come back on, we're going to play a trailer for a film that she's doing, and then hopefully she'll be back by the time this film is over. And if not, we'll go to our next guest. Now we're going to watch
Então tô falando, eu tô triste, mas tô alegre porque tô me lembrando dos meus antepassados. A nossa ancestralidade não são só o nosso pai e nem só a nossa mãe. A nossa ancestralidade é as nascentes dos rios, são as árvores, são as flores, são os peixes, são as algas dos mares. São os micro-organismos que estão na floresta, mas é o vento também.
A natureza, ela fala o tempo todo. Ela nos dá tudo. A gente tira tudo da terra, mas nem todos conseguem ouvir e entender.
It's such a beautiful film. Some really amazing footage that she got in the Amazon. We're still having trouble connecting to Indrani, so we're going to come back to her. Oh, wait, is that her? No. We're now going to go to Atosa, and Atosa may still be in transit on the way back to her hotel. But again, folks, this is what happens when you have a global podcast with so many amazing guests. We're not worried about it. We've got people in South Africa, in Colombia, in the Dakotas, and in New York on the way back from the UN. But let me go to Atosa. Atosa, just let me know you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you. Great.
All right. So we'll join. You'll join on video. Yeah, if you can join us on video until you get back to your hotel, we'll
I'm
take it from here.
almost back.
But
When I look
Atosa, like
back,
all the other panelists, you have a remarkable journey as well. You were born in Iran and moved to the American Midwest before founding an organization to protect indigenous rights in the Amazon. Please share more details of your experience with us about that journey.
yeah, well, there was a revolution when I was 13, and then a war. So my parents sent me to my uncle in Ohio, where I learned, English and learned the American culture. Didn't really fit too well, but I ended up learning about the rainforest in my first year in college, and it felt like I'd woken up to the importance of basically the biosphere and Gaia, and um, began to dedicate my life since a young age to the future of our planet and the future of the rainforest. I'm actually in my hotel, so maybe I can come back to you in a moment as soon as I switch over to my laptop.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Atosa, while you're doing, can you still hear me?
Yes, I can still hear you.
Okay,
Yes.
while you're switching to your laptop, I'll just continue to sing your praises and tell the audience a little bit more about you. Um, uh, Atosis founded Amazon Sacred Headwaters, which just won a Keeling Curve Prize, and it is one of the 15 finalists for the prestigious Earthshot Prize, which is bestowed by the Prince William of the UK. So you're joining us from South Africa, where next week 5 of those 15 finalists will receive a £1 million UK money prize. So just let us know when you're ready. But when you come back, tell us about the impact that Amazon Sacred Headwaters is having. And for those watching, Amazon Sacred Headwaters is a coalition of 30 indigenous nations in the Ecuadorian and Peruvian Amazon basin. And Tosa, just let me know if you need another minute or two.
Yes, please give me another minute. I'm just walking into my room.
Okay, absolutely. We'll come back. We'll come back to you, and let's go back to let's go to Joseph for a second. Um, Joseph,
Thank
there's a Washington-based nonprofit called Pixera Global that Sage is a part of, that Atosa's organization, Amazon Sacred Headwaters, is a part of, that launched an initiative called the Partnership for Digital Justice. One critical aspect to that initiative is decolonizing digital information. Can you tell us what that means to you, decolonizing digital information? And let's keep it about, if you can, just keep it somewhat brief, because I want to get back to Atosa when she's ready.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the question and I appreciate the time. And I appreciate Atosa making the effort that she's making trying to get here. She's such a wonderful speaker. And I so look forward to hearing her and having conversation with her again. The work she's doing is absolutely and utterly brilliant. When I think about digitizing our information and digitizing information more broadly, is that, like you mentioned previously in the intro, when we think about what our stories are as Lakota people or indigenous nations, it is not getting into the algorithm, if you will, of what is going to be fact when you find or you do an engine search, whether that's on Google or Microsoft, wherever the search is, and that our voices aren't represented in that way. And thus, our stories aren't represented in that way. Our truth and our connection to the earth and all of our history is not represented in that way. The history of this earth and of the world doesn't come through a European lens to tell the truth, what's truth about every part of the world and every experience and every spirituality that exists, and how we come to relationship with the earth and how we live currently and how we look to move forward. Because the colonized way of living has brought us to a point where we're at the brink of extinction and are praying that a election goes right next Tuesday. We put the fast pedal on colonized capitalistic effort that will drive further into a destructive pattern, or we start to recede and look back and have respect for ourselves and respect for the earth and how we consume and how we use and how we talk to one another and how we live in relationship with all of us in this space is very critical. So us to be able to tell our stories and have those things that exist digitally are vital, because it is how we look to move forward. When I pop this up and I bring it up, it needs to represent Indigenous voices. Like my sons are sitting here, on this screen. They need to sit on other screens when people pop up because we're of different cultures, different colors, different shapes and sizes, but we're all of the earth. And so as we look at that relationship, it is critical that that perspective be presented alongside all
Absolutely.
the other things.
And Joseph, I want to bring in some news because again, we are still waiting for Atosa to come on, but there's a really relevant question that I wanted to ask you. That just this week, President Biden apologized on behalf of the U.S. government for the mistreatment of generations of Native children who were taken away from their families years ago in an effort to strip them of their culture, history, and language. Can you share your thoughts on this with us through the lens of the subject, preserving wisdom?
There's been, through this administration, so much that has been done in representation for Indigenous people within this country, with the appointment of Deb Haaland as secretary, and other congressional leaders and senatorial leaders that are of Native American descent here or Indigenous to this country. Our voices and our policy and our platform has been represented like it never has been before. We have gotten recognition more in this administration than we've ever gotten in previous administrations. The ability for us to finance our project, for up to 70% of its construction costs would have never happened previously without all of those teams working together. So I believe it's been 3 administrations building into this one, we're able to finally see some results. For Biden's apology, I'm very happy that it occurred in the first place, but it must be followed with meaningful action. It must be followed by things that are historical wrongs that lend us to be in a place of people narrating who we are and the respect that we're given. So the U.S. Medals of Honor that were given to the 7th Cavalry for decimating my people when they surrounded them and destroyed them at Wounded Knee, when 300 women and children and elders were destroyed in them. They want to call it a massacre. It's not. We still have Leonard Peltier sitting in political prison, and no one is addressing him. No president dares to address this, it seems. So we must come to justice for that. We must come to a recognition of what actually occurred within all these schools and all of the children who were buried behind these schools, and an accounting for those things. And finally, we must come to some recompense for Native nations where all of our land and resources have been stripped away and then put into private gain, so that we too can move forward in a place where we can take care of ourselves. Here we have to do it by our own efforts, and that's a good thing, and that's who we are. But to have our land held in trust where we can't make a decision about it, we're still under control of the government. We're still held on to these things. So there's so much more to do. And this is just one step out of many that this administration has taken in the right way to move forward. So I applaud him for what he's done in this space. And let's get behind it and make all of the other things that need to happen. Because
Such a point. I'd like to note.
Until the Native people, until Indigenous people are treated with respect in this country, then no one else can.
No, thank you for that perspective, and again for pointing out some of the things that have made some of those steps, those positive steps forward about the Secretary of the Interior and things of that nature, and the apology. Of course, Leonard Peltier and the Wounded Knee incident certainly need to be addressed, but you're absolutely right. Thank you for sharing that perspective. Atosa is now back in her room, and Atosa, we told the audience that Amazon Sacred Headwaters has just won a Killing Curve Prize and is one of the 15 finalists for the prestigious Earthshot Prize. And you're joining us from South Africa, where next week 5 of those 15 will receive a £1 million prize in UK money. And tell us about tell us about the impact that Amazon Sacred Headwaters is having. And we mentioned to the audience that it's a coalition of 30 indigenous nations in the Peruvian and Ecuadorian Amazon.
Thank you so much, Lance. And it's really great to be in. Thanks for your patience while I managed the traffic through Cape Town. And I also just want to say, Joseph, every time I hear you speak, I'm so inspired and really feel so powerfully about the work you're doing and the importance of Indigenous rights. I actually was very much in college. I actually read Black Elk Speaks, and that was a big inspiration to me in the work I do today. And Floyd Westerman was a friend who also helped me guided me every time Indigenous people came to visit us. He was someone who really helped sweat lodges and worked with us to understand the commonality of Indigenous people's message and perspectives. So yeah, just to say how excited I am for the work you're doing as well. And yeah, so the Sacred Head, and the organization that I founded and ran for 20 years was committed to working with Indigenous peoples, but from the global north. It was Amazon Watch, the organization that's continuing to do amazing work in solidarity with Indigenous peoples. And I left in 2015 as an ED, and now still serve as a board president, and decided I really needed to work and hear and listen and support the institution of Indigenous peoples in the Amazon. And so I spent a few years listening to what needed to emerge. And what emerged in Ecuador and Peru was, in the most biodiverse part of the Amazon basin, a coalition of 30 Indigenous nations came together and declared their commitment to permanently protect all the intact forests that still remain in this bioregion, surrounded by 3 important rivers that form the headwaters of the Amazon basin. And here, Indigenous peoples had been winning battles against oil companies, one place at a time, but there was just a real important moment, aha moment, where they realized, even though they were winning some battles, stopping oil projects, stopping mining projects, that there were hundreds of more threats and more destructive projects coming down the river from where those first ones came, that they really needed to seek permanent protection, seek land rights, and shift the economic model from this life blind economic system that is literally devouring and is at war with nature and destroying the life support systems of the planet, to one that is basically life honoring. And Indigenous peoples their perspectives, their practices, their traditional knowledge systems, their way of cultivating had actually, their agricultural systems had actually contributed to increasing plant biodiversity in the rainforest. We normally think of human presence as, contrary to biodiversity flourishing, but in the Amazon, Indigenous peoples had created new species of plants, and they had lived sustainably for millennia with the forest. In fact, until LIDAR and modern detection times, people thought forests in the Amazon were intact. And now we're realizing they were not intact. They're actually all this amazing cultivated garden mixed with wild forest that had been regenerative, practiced regeneration. In fact, supporting, somewhere around 12 to 15 million people lived in South America before the arrival of Columbus. And so we know now that Indigenous people have the knowledge, the vision, the connection to nature, the reverence for nature, and the will and the determination to defend the lungs and the heart of the biosphere. So I really wanted to be in service to that vision. And when the coalition emerged to say we need to permanently protect the forest, we need to you know, leave oil and mining in the ground, stop expanding production of fossil fuels and gold and cattle and all of the palm oil and all the things that are destroying the forest, stop building dams in the name of clean energy, because dams in the tropics are not clean energy. They destroy life, and they basically are not a solution. And so I started working with this alliance 7 years ago, and yeah, it's been amazing and challenging, because again, 80% of this bioregion of the Amazon basin is under relentless threat from, as I said, an avalanche of destructive projects. And what we really need to do is shift the economic model. We need to support Indigenous sovereignty and land rights, food security, reforestation. We actually need to clean up the toxic waste dumps and the damage oil industries caused in this part of the Amazon for the last 50 years. We need to restore areas that are being deteriorated because of deforestation and fragmentation of the forest. And all of this in the backdrop of the worst drought and worst fire season the Amazon basin has experienced in
Wow.
the last 125 years. And
Josh,
so,
I want to thank you for that perspective. And I want to, I saw you speak recently during UN Week, and something you said really stuck with me, and I've been thinking about it a lot. And you were talking about how there of the 30 nations that are indigenous nations that are in this Amazon headwaters, many of them, or at least one of them, is a dream culture where they analyze their dreams every morning. And something you said that really stuck with me is the approach that we have now is not working, in terms of saving the environment. And maybe we need to do a little bit more of that. Will you tell us a little bit more about how that dream culture works, and where you think that could uh, where you think we can benefit from listening to that?
Thanks, Lance, for that prompt. I actually just want to say, when I was 17 and I started college and learned about the rainforest, I started having dreams, recurring dreams about being in the rainforest. And I didn't realize what was happening. For about 7 or 8 years, I had these recurring dreams until I decided, I must go. I must find out what this is about. And then when I was in the forest, the second time I went to the Amazon, I found myself in the landscape that I've been dreaming about. So, and then I
Amazing.
started working as part of the Amazon, where there are many cultures, many cultures, especially the Achuar, but also the Shuar, the Quichua, many cultures, the Zapara in this part of the Amazon are consider themselves dream cultures, because yes, their dreams, nightly dreams, as they wake up every morning at dawn or pre-dawn and have counsel in their families or in their communities or in their leadership of their village to discuss their dreams, to see what messages the nature, natural world, Pachamama, Gaia is sending to them. And based on those dreams, they make decisions, daily decisions, whether they're going to go hunting or work in the garden or go attend a meeting in town about the future of the oil project, or whether they're going to basically form an alliance or oppose something. These dreams are basically how they interpret the technology of connecting with Gaia, connecting with the mind of the forest. The forest is alive, seen as a living entity, the living forest. And they believe that the forest is in direct communication with the humans. Humans are not just a superior species, they are one humble species in a web of life. And that, like Joseph also said, every life form is a relative, is alive. The mountain is alive, the river's alive, the wind is bringing them message of ancestors. And so from that place, the dream cultures also have ceremonies using plant medicines like ayahuasca, like tobacco, like datura. And through these basically ceremonies, they connect deeper and find their purpose. Most of the indigenous people I work with have had visions, have had instructions from the dream world or from the ceremonies with plant medicine that guide them in the way they carry themselves and what they do, how they show up as leaders, how they show up as women, how they show up as family members, what they do with their forest, how they treat their rivers. And so, yeah, and what one of the leaders said to me, he actually does an online program on teaching modern world people about dreams and how to interpret dreams. He said to me, our linear mind is not going to solve the complex problems that we're facing as humanity. We actually need to dream and meditate and communicate with the natural world in order to find and navigate our way out of the current labyrinth. And I just think that that's such a powerful state. It is a powerful statement, because we have to become humble. We have to really look at the root causes of our suffering, and what we're doing as a species to the web of life. And a mantra that I go but with is this idea of looking how we are basically cells in the body of a living earth. And when you look at your own body, you realize that every cell in your body, in addition to serving itself and reproducing and regenerating, also serves a host. But as societies, we've forgotten we have a host. And what Indigenous peoples bring us back to is recognizing we are, all children of a web of life and have a responsibility to that, to be good ancestors and to be not superior to life, not dominating, not supremacy, but reciprocity and our sacred
Joseph
responsibility.
applauding, and that is such a powerful metaphor, such a powerful analogy, and that's what struck me when you mentioned it. And when I saw you speak, I was just blown away by the idea of we're not doing this right, and there is a way that works. I was going to go to Indrani, but she comes on and then she disappears. I feel so. I want to apologize to the audience, and Indrani has such amazing perspectives to offer, but she seems to be having some internet connectivity issues.
There she is.
There she is. Indrani, can you hear us? Indrani, let us know if you can hear us. I want to. We've been we played the trailer of your film before we lost you. I know you're having some connectivity issues there. We're so sorry that you're struggling with that, but we're so thankful that you're here. And let me quickly get a question out to you before we just in case you have some problems again. But we noted that you were a long time. Let us know if you can hear us. We noted that you were a longtime collaborator with David Bowie, and you've worked extensively with Beyonce and Lady Gaga and so many luminaries. Tell us about your journey from Kolkata to this unique perch in the artistic world, if you can still hear us. Okay. All right. We will get to Indrani, and I'm so sorry about that. But again, while we wait for her to come back, I'm going to go back to Joseph and Atosa with a question about Tuvalu. And this is something that you may have heard before, but the Pacific island of Tuvalu is replicating itself in the metaverse right now, recognizing that it might not survive the rising sea levels that threaten its habitability. Why do you believe it is important, Joseph and Atosa, to protect indigenous knowledge and culture like this beyond some of the reasons that we mentioned at the top of the program? And enough so that they're going to try to, for posterity, replicate themselves in the metaverse. Joseph, let's start with you.
Um, Thank you for the question. And it goes back to something that Atosa had said and something that my mother had said, something that we look back to our ancestors, that we must be a good relative today and be good ancestors for those that are coming, which is what they're doing. Tuvalu is trying to represent, to hold their knowledge so that their children can go back to their roots and from their souls and to their ancestry to live a good life, to live a humble life, to live a life without trying to be dominant. Is so important. I'm so happy my sister had mentioned those things because that's the truth. That is the truth of where we need to be and what we need to teach our children to have respect. And all indigenous cultures come down to that connection from your nari, your spirit, to the earth, to the roots in the soil, to all that lives therein. And then we travel through that back to the Milky Way. We are the conduit, and we're not teaching ourselves that, but our ancestors knew that. Our ancestors teach that. And so it's important to hit in this particular story with Tuvalu that they protect that knowledge. And it is what we look to do the same thing, with our museum cultural interpretive space and telling our own story to ourselves so that we hear our own voices from our own people, from our own family members, have a connection to our roots and who we are, because that voice and that vibration that comes through your voice that tells someone that I love you means something, that I respect you, that I hold you means something. And so it's important in that space. And I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Natosha. Same question, and let me note that just as a programmatic note, if Indrani comes back, I might want to cut to her while we have her. Indrani, she keeps popping on and popping off. I feel so sorry for her internet connection. All right, Natosha, please go ahead and answer the same question about Tuvalu.
I mean, I would just say that indigenous traditional knowledge is, tied to land, tied to place, and we are losing it with every language, with every ecosystem loss. We lose also some of that traditional knowledge. So it's great that they are documenting and preserving that, and really do need to figure out how to. We really do need to be thoughtful about the intergenerational transfer of knowledge systems, and indigenous peoples are all over the world facing, loss of culture, loss of language, loss of knowledge systems, loss of their ancestral territories. So, when you think about something like 80% of the world's biodiversity is on indigenous lands, half of the world's intact forests are indigenous lands, really have to say, we've got to prioritize. We have to first see indigenous knowledge as not a knowledge system, not just wisdom, but knowledge, and that we also have to find ways to help them protect it and preserve it for their future generations, and make sure that places like we're also losing people in the Pacific. There's a lot of islands that are basically going underwater with climate change. We have to really recognize about climate refugees. What's going to be our response to caring for entire islands that are going to be submerged? Tuvalu's one, Kiribati, has already begun to look for home for 100,000 people of its nation. So we really have a responsibility as a global community to help address the idea, how we relocate and support the shrinking and sinking islands and their populations.
That's such a germane point, and thank you for noting that, because again, in this, because we've been focusing on culture here, but to your point, we're going to have to relocate entire nations to other nations. I know that Kiribati and Tuvalu are already exploring Australia as a potential place to go when, probably when their islands are overwhelmed. And just to note to the audience, it doesn't matter. An island doesn't have to completely disappear underwater for it to be uninhabitable. It just needs to have that surface level, have enough water there that you can't grow plants, you can't have a water supply. So you don't need the island doesn't need to disappear to disappear, because it won't be habitable if certain of these uh, uh, bars are met, which is unfortunate. Let's talk about AI for a second, because that's another part of the Partnership for Digital Justice that Atosa, you and Joseph, both are your organizations are both members of. Artificial intelligence is only as intelligent as the sources from which it pulls, and if all of that wisdom that we collectively have on the internet comes from countries and the global north, AI will never evolve using all of the most relevant wisdom and source material. So tell us about why that's important for all of us, for digital for indigenous wisdom to be digitized. Toast, let's start with you.
Well, I mean, I think there is an issue of using AI as a tool, and I would say we need to make sure that the mind of nature and values of indigenous peoples are going to be embedded in any code that's going to be uh, you know having power over our decision making, our governance, our knowledge. And so, I would say it also has to do with indigenous people having data sovereignty, to decide what they want to, put into the cloud, what they want to share with the world, and what they don't. I also have been personally working the last 5 years as a judge in terms of, using AI and using as a tool for measuring biodiversity, monitoring biodiversity, and protecting forests. We've been working both in communities in Ecuador as part of the judge for the X Prize Rainforest. We were looking at how to use novel technologies to detect biodiversity, to use, for example, recordings of bird sounds and insect sounds, and using AI to do algorithms in order to identify new species, in order to identify migration patterns, in order to identify, build a database of biological diversity. In the Amazon, I think, less than a third of all species in the Amazon have been cataloged, and we're
Amazing.
losing 7 football fields a minute of rainforest. And so we really do want to create tools to rapidly help us assess biodiversity, help us protect territories. Obviously, we have to be careful about things like patenting, naming, benefit sharing. Those are some of the topics that are right now being discussed in Cali at the Biodiversity Convention. Who benefits from traditional knowledge? Who benefits from genetic information of plant and animal species, and how is that guarded and in a sacred way that that isn't used for purposes that it can be perverse incentives for profit, for ownership, for domination, for mutation, genetic manipulation, gene editing. Those kinds of things are a big concern. But we do want to understand before we destroy the cathedrals of nature. We want to understand what's there and hopefully use that information to protect it.
Thank you, Tosa. And Indrani, we'll come back. Joseph, we'll come back to you in a sec. Indrani, let us know if you can hear us. I'm just going to give you a quick prompt. Tell us about your work, because I know you're having some connectivity issues. So just tell us about your work in working in the Amazon. Let us know if you can hear us.
Hi, everyone. So great to be here. I'm so sorry about the connect.
Yeah, I apologize to the audience.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, but the connection is not so great. And I'll just let the audience know that you're in Colombia because you were there for the COP16 biodiversity summit. So yeah, please go ahead. Oh well. So Joseph, let's come back to you with the question we were asking about AI.
I think I mentioned this a little earlier, but I don't think I could have said it better than Atosa had just done. All the considerations that need to be concerned about our sovereignty and our voice of our own languages and what we choose to share and what we choose to keep sacred to us, are vitally important to our own identities. But it is important that our perspective in the world be exposed by our own voices so that we can help balance what is being consistently put into AI circles or to the databases about what is circling our minds as conscious thought, and that indigenous conscious thought be presented in a way that has weight. In particular, like we go back to humility and modesty and who we are and respect, and how our voice is even our prayer, and how our song is our prayer, and how we hold our language and hold ourselves into a way that, like for Lakotas, there's no curse words. There's no way to curse or damn one another, in the space, or to have that type of feeling. And it is one of relationship. So it's important for that to be represented in some way, because like I said, we all turn to, I held up my phone a second ago, and I'm going to be on it about a half hour after we're done with this call doing something, I'm sure. And I have to consistently screen what it is that I'm taking in so that I can absorb what I need to help my people, to help our projects, so we can help move these things forward in a way that comes through culturally, that is true for us, and not consistently in a colonized way. So it's important for us to recognize that as we move through these spaces and use these tools, so that we can remember who we are and how we need to protect ourselves moving forward. And for the rest of the world too, to recognize that and understand that, just because it's written in documentation or some voice says it or a white face says it, doesn't mean that that's the authority of it. There's much more to this world than what is currently presented over the last, let's see, what is it, the last 300, 400 years, out of eons of knowledge, eons of civilization from around the world, from the Maya, and that's not even their name, from those civilizations, and the Incas, and everyone from North and South America. I am always a believer when we look at our sweat ceremonies. They came from the South and moved to the North. And we see the trajectory of that happening. So that contradicts the Bering Land Bridge, that we came and we moved south. So there's much more to tell, because there's much more history that we don't understand. And all of that needs to be represented in a space. So we can't take this last snapshot of this colonized few centuries and say that that's the truth when we must explore what all has occurred previous to it. And that's really what we need to look at that lens of AI through.
Such a good point, Joseph. And I want to ask you something, Joseph, that Atosa referred to or referenced a few minutes ago when she was talking about ownership. Um, a lot of times when we're talking about digitizing information, we use the word capture, to capture that information. And I'm sure that through centuries of having been burned before, that word sets off alarm bells. Uh, Tell us about um, the how you view the opportunity to uh, to collect this information and share it in a way that the Lakota and Sioux people and all other indigenous communities get to have retain ownership of that knowledge and benefit from that knowledge. How do you envision that relationship taking place?
There's a level of respect that you must give to each family about the stories that they want to tell. Period. Period. And that is collectively a community. So as we gather the stories of our history, family by family, and where it occurs, where events occurred, what they want to talk about for their ancestors, their lineage, who they came from, like where I came from Grandpa Wumbo, and how he came to be with Sitting Bull, and how he came to survive the onslaught of the American machine that moved into this space. How much of that do I want to tell? Do I tell every bit of his personal life that I know of, or do I share just that bit that's important for us to move on? And there's a lot of stories that I'm sure I wasn't told of as a child, because it's not meant for me. What is meant for me is what I need to grow and move forward so that I can survive, our culture can survive. So it's up to each person to be in that space. We couldn't do it collectively and say that I speak for all Lakota people, you know, and how we are categorized as Sioux. We never call ourselves Sioux. Only through colonization do we call ourselves Sioux. But I am Lakota, a Titoan, a Hunkpapa, So as I tell my own story and how I want to represent myself, it's very important. But it's only family by family, and I think for Indigenous nations like us at Standing Rock, what folks and families are going to do at Cheyenne River and beyond, it's going to be up to them and how they say, we give you permission to release our story about this or that, you know. And then when their relatives come back and want to hear that, then they can tap on that button and go, that is my grandma's voice or my uncle's voice. And that is true what my other relative said about what happened there. And it is what we are meant to hear. There's a
Thank you.
wisdom. There's a wisdom in that.
And Atosa, do you have something to add to that?
No, I so agree with everything Joseph said. But I wanted to say something that occurred to me is like, but there is some history that is, doesn't even need AI. There's history that still hasn't been told. The history of, for example, how in California Native people were hunted down and state-sponsored genocide, where the state offered 5 cents and 10 cents per scalp of native person that was killed and brought to the state during the gold rush. Like those are the stories that hopefully through more awareness and more social media and more direct communication of voices of indigenous peoples we can reflect on as a community. Can we prevent the next genocide? It's happening on our watch today. There's a genocide happening today in Palestine on our watch. And we're watching hospitals bombed and refugee camps bombed and women children starved to death. And it's happening like it happened during World War II, like it happened in the Armenian genocide, like it happened in the Native American genocide. How are we learning from history? And do we understand history so that we don't repeat it? And so I do think about, can AI help with that? Can we find a way to put constraints on human behavior that is out of the boundary of ethics? That it's, when I think about the Gaia hypothesis, how is it this idea of Earth as a living system, and go and the earlier reflection that we are cells in the body of a living Earth, then I go, well, what is war? Is war autoimmune disease, or is war cancer, or is our economy modeled after cancer? What is it that's happening, and what is the mind of humanity collectively happening? And of course we have an election next week, and I read a really the social media posts that are going on, some of them are really brilliant reflections, that the trees continued to vote for the axe because it had a wood handle, and they thought they saw themselves in the handle. Like, what do we need to do as a human civilization to harmonize upwards our values, our ethics, our understanding of ourselves, our species, and to know that we're only killing the biosphere. War is only basically killing ourselves. It's suicide, and autoimmune maybe is a great metaphor for that.
I saw a social media post as well that talking about the World Series, where the poster said the Yankees gave up 5 runs in one inning. The Yankees found 5 runs. This the whole series is rigged. So
You're breaking my heart right now.
oh, a Yankee fan in the Dakotas.
It was tragic. It was tragic.
Yeah, well, as a New Yorker, I'm very glad. And Tosa, I believe you live in Los Angeles now, so I'm very glad the Dodgers showed that what they could do. But I was very sad as a New Yorker to see that happen. But we're coming up on time, and again, I want to say to the audience, I'm so sorry that Dr. Aaron was not able to join us, the ambassador from Dominica to the UN. This Sunday is National Dominican Independence Day, and so he was tied up at the UN with all kinds of extra meetings that he didn't realize he was going to have. So he was deeply apologetic. We'll definitely have him on at another time. And as far as Indrani is concerned, you were able to see her face a few times. Her connectivity where she is in Colombia right now did not work out for us today, but that's the nature of having such a incredible global event like this. And Atosa is joining us from South Africa. She started off the episode in the back of a cab. We're so grateful to her and for joining us. And again, I want to emphasize how incredible the Earthshot Prize is, and just to be a finalist for it is amazing. And she and her organization may win that next week. So our fingers are crossed for her. And Joseph, we're just so delighted that you can join us, and just to hear about your $500 million potential windfall. Wow, that is so deserved, and what an incredible turn of events, and to come from renewable energy is amazing. We'd love to introduce you to Blue Planet Alliance, which is another partner with the Samuel Lawrence Foundation, and they often participate in these video podcasts. So we're going to end there because we're coming up on the hour. But I just want to thank all of the panelists for attending today. Really, really thankful to have everyone come in, and again from all over the world. The Samuel Lawrence Foundation would like to thank everyone for sharing their perspectives and for this wonderful conversation. And to rewatch this podcast next week or to see a transcript, go to the Samuel Lawrence Foundation website in the coming days. The website is samuellawrencefoundation.org. Thank you again for the panelists. Thank you to Blue Planet Alliance for their partnership in First Fridays. Please also visit brooklynstorylab.net to learn more about the purpose-driven work that we are doing globally. And lastly, come back next month in December when we'll have another episode of First Fridays. And this time we'll have a look back at all the highlights from our programs from 2024. Now let me give it back to Bart.
Lance, thank you again for your moderation today. It was a global effort. My apologies for some of the Zoom technical connections, but as always, Lance, it was brilliant. We hope to see all of you at the next Samuel Lawrence Foundation's First Friday webinar on December 6th, 2024. I'd like to ask each of you to sign up for our newsletter and support SLF on Giving Tuesday this year on December 3rd, 2024. Thank you very much.